In this video, we're going to discuss the dockerignore file and how it can be used to exclude files from the Docker build context. We will also see how this can help speed up your Docker builds and improve security. At the bottom, you can see a line that the dockerignore file controls what gets sent to the Docker daemon during builds. The Docker daemon is a background service that manages Docker images and containers. A dockerignore file is a file that specifies files and directories that should be excluded from the Docker build context when building an image. Think of it like a gitignore file but for Docker. It helps to keep your Docker images lean and secure, and also helps to speed up your Docker builds. It is a simple text file that lists patterns that Docker uses to determine which files and directories to exclude. So, why should you use a dockerignore file? There are two main benefits, which are faster builds and enhanced security. By excluding unnecessary files and directories, you can significantly reduce the size of the build context and the amount of data that needs to be transferred to the Docker daemon. This can result in faster build times. Also, the dockerignore file prevents sensitive files, such as API keys, passwords, and other confidential information, from being included in your Docker images. This enhances the security of your application by reducing the risk of exposing sensitive data. The basic syntax of the dockerignore file is quite simple. Each line in the file specifies a pattern that Docker uses to determine which files and directories to exclude. Here are some examples. To exclude a single file, simply specify the file name. For example, secrets.txt. To exclude a directory and all its contents, specify the directory name followed by a /. For example, node_modules followed by a /. You can also use wildcards to match multiple files or directories. For example, *.log will exclude all files with the .log extension. Another example is temp* will exclude all files and directories that start with the word temp. Here are some common patterns that you might want to include in your dockerignore file. Development dependencies such as node_modules and .git. Build artifacts such as dist and build directories. Environment files and logs such as .env* and *.log. You can use ! To create exceptions to exclusion rules. For example, you can exclude all .text files, but include a specific file named important.txt. To do this, first exclude all .text files using the *.text pattern. Then, include the important.txt file using the !important.text pattern. Another example is, you can exclude everything in a directory called docs but keep the README files in that directory. To do this, first exclude the entire docs directory using the docs / pattern. Then, include the README files using the !docs /README* pattern. Here is a complete example of a dockerignore file. As you can see, it includes patterns to exclude node_modules, .git, all.log files, all.env files, the coverage directory, the readme.md file, any file starting with Dockerfile, and finally the dockerignore file itself. Excluding the dockerignore file from the build context can prevent unexpected behavior. Here are some best practices to keep in mind when working with dockerignore files. Start early by creating a dockerignore file before the first build. This will help you establish good habits from the beginning. Review the file regularly and update patterns as the project evolves and new files are added. This will ensure that your dockerignore file remains effective and up to date. If you like this video, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. Visit CodeLucky.com for more such useful content.